Anthony, welcome back. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Tim.
Yeah, of course, of course. So I just kind of wanted to get your take on some things that are happening in Milpitas right now, or that did happen. So we had an agenda item in the past city council meetings, and I know you're very well aware of this. You're on the council, um, and it was about cannabis tax in Milpitas, and then it disappeared. Uh, so what's your take on that? Like, what happened there?
First of all, I think the good news is for some folks that wanted to see that item be heard is that it will be reappearing. But going back to your question, it was an item on exploring the possibility of allowing the voters to decide whether or not to have a tax on cannabis in Milpitas. And during this time, as you can imagine, every city really has so much on their list that they need to take care of. June is when the budget is decided. And, as we're wrapping up our fiscal year, deciding the budget for the next fiscal year, there's a lot of things that are going to be needed to discuss, to be prioritized, to be reprioritized, where our money is going and what our priorities are going to be for the next year. That said, I'm always supportive of revenue measures, as we definitely desperately need the revenue right now for our workers, for our services, to really have a good quality of life for all of our residents. But long story short, we had a very packed agenda of things to do. And when it comes to any ballot measure to be put on the ballot, you need a supermajority vote. What that means is it's instead of the traditional three vote threshold for passing, for approving anything, this would require four votes. Four out of five council members would have to agree to put this ballot measure on the ballot. And, you know, uh, based off of sentiments that I've been hearing in different contexts, I had a very strong belief that I would not have the four votes needed to continue that conversation. It's especially difficult, when you hear your colleagues very strongly opinioned against a position on anything really. For all of us as public officials, uh, we should respect the process and really hear the argument for any item before making our judgment. But unfortunately, sometimes that's not the case. And I think in this case, I very much value public input, public opinion. I think it's a misconception that public comment was, squashed. How these Zoom meetings have affected public hearings in general, it's changed how public comment is received. Whenever somebody submits anything for public comment, it's submitted electronically and it's read to us. Generally, we get the context of it, the text that they submit. So, I had made a decision to halt that conversation so that we can move forward with the rest of our agenda item. We had anticipated a very, very long conversation, a very long debate on this tax measure. But for me, what I had anticipated was that the debate was going to be hijacked and the merits of the debate would be shifted instead of focusing on a conversation about revenue, from a legitimate source. That conversation would be a fundamental philosophical, political debate on drug use. And I wanted to be efficient with moving the speed of government, and that's how it went down. I'm hoping that when this item comes back, that I'm wrong, that that I do have the four votes. You know,
Well, a couple
I
things. Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead and finish.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, because now that we're actually going to hear the item, it's going to change how I'm going to vote. It should not be interpreted that my decision to halt that conversation was indication of my disapproval or non-support of cannabis itself, or even the tax measure. You know, um, the decision to halt that conversation is not going to be the same as the decision to allow the voters to vote how they want to vote on it. You know that's going to change if we're able to have that conversation. But before, because we weren't able to have that conversation, as we had a lot of things that need to be discussed, and it was time sensitive.
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
right now you guys are working on a lot of emergency measures and very time sensitive measures just due to the times
yeah,
and I know that
and
the
we got
capital
a lot
improvement
done.
plan and all that is going on right now, and
It
there's a
is,
lot of
and
really time sensitive stuff.
we just went through our budget study session. I think that was very productive, and I think my decision to do what I did at the meeting prior to that really set up the framework so that we can move forward in a manner that's swift, because a lot of these things are time sensitive.
Well, a couple things I noticed with the measure was that there seemed to be a large portion of people who were assuming that this agenda item was for you guys to decide it for Milpitas. It's like, all right, if they approve this, that means there will be cannabis in Milpitas. And there's two things wrong with that. One is that it was an agenda item to put it on the ballot for the Milpitas voters to vote on, which more democracy is always better. Like that's a big
Right.
decision that I
Sure.
think in all reality should be decided by Milpitas voters. But another thing that people it's either they're ignoring or they don't realize is it's already in Milpitas. It's legal
Yeah.
statewide, and delivery places deliver to Milpitas, and
We're
there.
not getting the taxes on that, by the way.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah,
and San Jose, they have dispensaries, and people can just go to a
they do.
dispensary in San Jose and buy it. But the part that trips me out is that cannabis is already Milpitas. We're just losing out on tax revenue. Like
Yeah,
it's
totally.
already here. It's not putting tax on it or not is not going to change the fact that it's already here. And so, there's a certain advocacy group in here. It's just like we need to keep Milpitas family friendly by not allowing this. But the thing is, it's already here. So
Yeah, if
I don't really get
anybody
it.
wanted to purchase marijuana, either for recreational or for medical purposes, if you're in Milpitas, it's not that difficult to get. If you have a smartphone, you can pull up an app, like this right here, Weed Maps,
You
and
had that ready.
get it uh, for the purposes of this
Education.
video, obviously. Um, but it's really not difficult to get. But at the same time, what is difficult to get is revenue for the city,
Yeah.
and you know we're losing out on this opportunity here in San Jose this year alone. The dispensaries are bringing in the most revenue for the city. They surpassed the card rooms. They've surpassed the hotels um, in San Jose. Primarily, look, during this whole stay at home, shelter in place period, card rooms aren't operating. Hotels are, going down. But what is open are these cannabis dispensaries, which the state has deemed essential services, because there are people who genuinely need the resources there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's been a few articles floating around like, how to lose money by selling weed. It's you're the government. The studies from those articles were taken out of Canada, which had another major, a few major problems with that. I think in 2018, California brought in around $1 billion in tax revenue from cannabis, and so that's irrelevant. Like it doesn't translate to California. Um,
Right.
but I don't want to debate the topic of should we have it here or should we not too much.
Right.
My main thing was it was a big deal when it was an agenda item, and people saw it as a big deal when it was removed. And I wanted to clear that up a
Yeah.
bit with you here.
Generally, when I push for a policy, if I am actively pushing for a policy, I will recognize that some policies, or at least some elements of a policy, may be easier to swallow uh, when phased in time, rather than having it come in all at once. When I first started the conversations on cannabis, it took me a whole year of meetings in the cannabis subcommittee to work with, the most vocally anti cannabis person on the council, to bring him to the middle. And whereas when he started, he was, you know, uh, not tolerant of any anything remotely related to cannabis, he became a supporter, and that took a year's worth of conversation, of meetings, of staff reports, of consultant reports, of studies to get there. In regards to this topic now, we have a different council than I did before,
Hmm.
and I have not had that time to work on bringing my colleagues together on this item, because that's where this vote is going to be decided on, the council. You
Well,
know,
when it was originally brought up a couple weeks ago, were you expecting that agenda item to make an appearance, or did it surprise you?
I it caught me off guard. Yeah, I didn't know until the day of,
Mm.
and for me, I rolled with it, um, because you know that was my gut reaction was, wow, I can finish what I started, what I wanted to do, and so I wanted to move forward with it. And then I realized that, okay, well, I haven't had time to prepare, the environment around me. This is not the 60s, the 70s. This is not um, the opioid crisis. These are different times, and the science backs it up. But that said, I think, to the people who are watching, you should know though that there, like you said earlier, Tim, there is a difference between the tax ballot measure and the actual zoning and land use policies regarding cannabis uh,
Well, yeah,
cultivation and
and this was just the tax measure. Like this had no impact on
exactly.
more or less cannabis in Milpitas. This was just if there is cannabis in Milpitas, can we profit from it? That's all that this
Right.
was. Uh,
Yeah.
which is why I was surprised that there were so many people against it. It's like it doesn't change the amount of cannabis that's in Milpitas. All it does is it
Right.
changes how much money Milpitas is making from it. And
It's a framework. Yeah.
yeah, and even the most anti-cannabis people that I have spoken to or know have all said, "Well, if it's here, we might as well profit from it." And
Yeah.
what's crazy is how many people were just like, "Absolutely not. It's in Milpitas, but we will not make money from this." No, and that
Yeah.
kind of blew me away. And at the end of the day, whether you agree on it or not, what kills me is that some people don't want the Milpitas residents to decide for themselves. That's what kills me. That's actually, besides the confusion of kind of what
And
happened, that's one
I,
thing I
I
wanted to bring up
ironically,
tonight.
ironically, it's the same people though that keep saying the voters should decide. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
just a few
and
months ago.
yeah, and anyone who knows my public side knows that I've called them out on this many times, and they refuse to respond to that one part. I don't want to get into that too much because that's a whole nother deal. But they won't admit that they just don't want this. It's yeah, it's like, how can you decide for an issue that'll benefit you if the public votes on it? You want the public to vote on it, but something that most likely won't benefit you, you want that out of the hands of the public. Like, that's not a democracy. That's something completely different.
Yeah,
And what kills me is, this is Milpitas. This is California, which is in the United States, where we vote and we have a democracy, and that's what makes us free. And people are actively trying to strip that away. Like, me personally, I really, I don't care much about cannabis in Milpitas. I'm
right.
not a cannabis user myself. I don't judge if you are. It's legal. Do what you want. I don't use it myself. What I do care about is the people's right to vote and to choose, and that's what I care about, which is why it just seems so like un-American that people are trying to keep this out of the hands of voters.
Right. The most difficult part, I think, of having this conversation with these opposition folks, I think certain, very small amount of them are genuinely misinformed, right,
Mm-hmm.
on the topic, and that if they are better informed on it, their views would differ. And then I think that there are a lot of folks who are opposed to this who know exactly what they're talking about, but choose to relay that misinformation. And I think it's completely irresponsible of them, that they know that this is a tax measure, yet they choose to, again, focus on the conversation on uh, the actual policy itself. You know, the, and how do you argue against that?
Well,
How do you argue against a wall, really?
it's the people who, anything that has to do with cannabis, is they are going to do everything they can to shut it out. Um,
Yeah,
and whether anyone likes it or not, it's it's coming in like a freight train to California, whether anyone likes it or not. And I mean, eventually the entire United States, but California, they've already taken the first few steps to just making it completely just open, and it's
yeah,
gonna be here whether they like it or not. And right now, the cities are preparing, like, okay, well, if this is gonna hit our city, let's regulate it, let's profit from it, um, and there probably will be a little bit of public safety costs associated with it, just with people, just like how people mishandle alcohol. People are gonna mishandle marijuana in some way, shape, or another, and that would bring in some money for public safety to help combat that, and then some. It'll bring in a ton of money.
yeah,
But that's another thing people will use to argue, is like, oh, people are gonna smoke weed and then drive around town and get in a car accident. But let me tell you, I would rather have someone driving under the influence of marijuana than alcohol.
yeah.
One of them
Well,
is neither of them are good, but one of them is far more dangerous than the other.
I do want to take a notion to a moment to dispel the notion that government is getting rich off of this. That
I'm not saying they're getting
we're in the,
rich,
yeah,
um,
I know,
but yeah,
but
yeah.
people, will say things like, the council is in their pocketbooks, of the cannabis industry and whatnot, and uh, that government is, selling out to the industry and whatnot. Like, the fact of the matter is, um, we have to fund services,
Hmm.
and and in these difficult times, I don't think any government agency, is making a profit. Government is not in the business of making profit. Everything that the revenue that we take in, we have to decide, how to redistribute that. Um, and the police and firefighters, the first responders, who are keeping us safe, the uh, all of the employees who are working, um, all the services that you know uh, the residents benefit from and enjoy a good quality of life from, the safe city that the city is right now, all of that has to be paid from somewhere. And you know I think people need to understand um, that this is not done in the spirit of corporate greed or capitalism or anything remotely like that. I think people should also understand that the people in the cannabis industry, it's not as lucrative as some people think it is. It's not that anybody, any drug dealer can jump into the business and become Heisenberg from Breaking Bad. That said, I should note that since the first go around a while back of on cannabis,
This was
no
2018, right?
folks from the 2018, nobody in that industry has actually pushed for um, dispensaries in Milpitas. I think that's something that people need to understand. Um,
Yeah, it
that
doesn't
the
seem like they
draw,
care about Milpitas a lot.
yeah, and I think a part of that's the economy. A part of that is just like they need to focus, where they do have business right now,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
instead
just
of
a quick interesting little thing on that is that in Milpitas, cannabis as a topic is like, and anytime it's brought up, Milpitas goes crazy, and it's split. It's completely split. Like, there's a portion of the people who like hate it, don't want anything to do with it, and then there's a portion of the people who are just like, we need it. This needs to be here. We need this here now. And it's always this crazy hot button issue in Milpitas. And to the cannabis industry, they don't give a crap. They don't care. Like, they don't care what happens in Milpitas. Um,
yeah, it's
because yeah, like you said, like
they're taking their business out elsewhere
yeah, San
where
Jose's right
where they
next
are
door.
welcomed. Yeah.
Yeah, and San Jose welcomes them, and they'll just right next door. It's not like they're losing out on a market.
But I would say though that because the conversation, the parties involved have only generally been, the group of uh, cannabis activists versus the anti-cannabis activists. It needs other people like to come in as a coalition to have that an effective conversation and actually move the needle, right? So if you are for cannabis, you know, it's not gonna do you much good if you bring out more cannabis activists to just say, hey, we really want this. You need to build a coalition of the people who aren't cannabis activists, who can empathize with your cause, see the bigger picture, uh, and will, you know, lend a hand and speak up and say, yeah, I, uh, like yourself, Tim, I uh, am not a cannabis user. I'm fairly neutral on this, but the city does need a source of revenue, and this can go towards the schools where I'm a teacher at, for example, or towards anti-drug education programs, towards mental health programs, things like that. Get allies from different parts of the community that aren't traditionally just known as pro cannabis, because of course the pro cannabis people are gonna advocate for it. We expect
Yeah,
that already,
yeah,
and so are my colleagues who might feel on the opposite end, on this issue, what they need to hear is the argument from people who are in the middle, who are, don't really have a say, have a stake in this, like why it matters to them, and that's how you change the needle, and that's how you get to four.
Well, that's
You know,
that's
I'm not.
actually pretty interesting what you just said, because this whole time I kind of just, because to be honest, I haven't put a whole lot of thought into cannabis and Milpitas, just because I don't care. Like whether we have shops or not, there people seem to have this notion that we're gonna put a cannabis shop right next to an elementary school. And that just I know
Oh
planning,
yeah.
and I know zoning, and I know Milpitas planning, very well, and that's just
when
not gonna happen. That's
when I had framed my zoning ordinance, the entire map, and whatnot, during that conversation, the argument that the anti folks were making was Phan wants 16 pot shops. Like that's not. I didn't push for like a set number of pot shops. I am creating the framework for where they can locate and whatnot.
I remember hearing that headline different, and you went easy on him. The stuff I heard was Phan wants 16 pot shops that he will personally get rich from. That's
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
heard.
and
Which is just
and you
so stupid.
it is, and it's despicable, the lengths that some people will go to tarnish my reputation, to slander me. For the most part, when we have it's common to have disagreements in politics, and it's okay to have those disagreements, and we're supposed to have disagreements, but have it as a respectful dialogue. When you make it personal, when you uh, target my ethics, based off of false information, that's not okay, and that's not how you convince me to really change my opinion on anything,
Yeah.
um, on any position. Like I'm obviously for cannabis and for the tax measure, um, but I would never say that that can't change if you give me a good enough argument as to why we shouldn't have these things. I will still hear your argument. It might change my mind, um, but I cannot hear your argument if all you're doing is attacking my name and reputation.
Yeah, and a lot of people just don't think that way, don't get it, or they're too worked up to ever think that way. But going back to the zoning really quick, if there was ever a cannabis shop that was put in Milpitas, it would probably be a portion of Milpitas that you have probably never been to in your life. Uh, like in some industrial zone hidden in one of the back corners, off, some
Well,
street that you've never been to, and you wouldn't go there unless you worked there or had a client there or something. And the whole notion that there's gonna be 16 marijuana shops, and they're gonna be perfectly spread out to be right next to each school in Milpitas. And
yeah, like
don't forget the
that's
one in your backyard. Like
how'd you know about that one, Tim?
but like the people just assume, and even if they know that that's not the case, that's the narrative they're pushing, which is just
It
ridiculous.
is,
Because if you
and
know anything
yeah,
about Milpitas planning, you know that every single type of shop, every single type of business, every single type of place of assembly or type of housing goes in a certain part of Milpitas that's very, very planned out and thought out,
right,
and it makes sense to not one person, not the city
right.
council, but entire planning department. and
the
having a
the
marijuana
purpose of it is so that you can actually control it, right? Like,
yeah.
without that framework, without that zoning ordinance, should, a shift in state or federal policy ever come, we won't have that control.
I'm
And
actually very glad you brought that up because something happened very recently with a bill that was passed about ADUs, basically in-law units. We were going to set framework that never quite kind of made it to the final stages, that if you were to rent out your garage, you would need additional parking. And California, it was SB. Oh, I do not remember the number. SB 17. I don't know. But it was a lot that had to do with that, and it basically came out and said, okay, if your rented out unit is already a part of your current structure, you cannot require additional parking, and that was a law. And so now Milpitas, when they're setting their rules, they can't require additional parking if someone rents out their garage to someone else. And that's with housing. That's something completely different, but that just
right,
shows what can happen when you let the state decide things for you, and when you don't
yeah,
have a proper framework set up to be able to handle that. And so theoretically, if we do nothing about cannabis zoning, cannabis tax measures, all this stuff, eventually California, because this is the direction California's heading, eventually they'll come out with their own laws, and we won't
yeah,
have a say in the issue.
yeah. So essentially, you didn't want 16 pot shops. Well, too bad the state says you can have 32 now. Like that
Yeah.
that can be a scenario. Um, you know, you need to set the framework for the future. Oh, you don't want uh, money coming in from dispensaries because you don't want dispensaries in the first place. Um, well, too bad, because the dispensaries are gonna be here now, and we get no revenue. Like, you have to have that mechanism in place ahead of time. And I even if we're not really prepared for dispensaries right now, even if the dispensaries don't want to be here right now, we should at least have that mechanism in place so that uh, in the future, should anything change, we can collect
Well, yeah,
on that.
and to sum up this whole conversation a little bit, one point is that you're pro cannabis. That's very well established. It's very well known. But what I've been getting lately is that even though you're pro cannabis right now, you're pro regulation more than anything. Like, you understand the fact that a lot of people don't seem to get, the fact that it's already here, whether we like it or not. And now what you want to do is you want to be able to control it. You want to be able to say, okay, uh, if you ever move in, these are the only places where you can do it. If you're going to be selling it to people in Milpitas, we need to take a cut of the tax revenue. And this is how you're gonna be. These are the rules you're gonna abide by. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you're obviously pro cannabis, but right now you're pro, like, setting a foundation and a framework to where it'll be appropriate when it does come in.
Oh, absolutely. Like, um, you know, when I had initially looked into the policy and whatnot, the way that I would wanted to, as I mentioned, phase in the policy, it would start off being incredibly regulated, to almost extreme measures. But, you're still seeing permitted uses, but again, highly regulated. And then as we move forward, slowly lift those regulations, because if you didn't have those regulations at all, or if you loosen them up immediately, you know, then there's no more room to control the situation. then
Yeah.
every conversation going forward, if you started off with, okay, let's set the cap at 50, shops, then you're going to be getting lobbied to open 60, to
Mm-hmm.
open 70,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I would have wanted to start off incredibly low in terms of the number, high in terms of the regulation, and reform it as we move forward, as we see fit, to the standards, the realities of the economy, to the realities of public safety and whatnot.
Well, this is an interesting perspective that's going to mess with some of the anti-cannabis people's heads, I think. Um, your policies are actually the policies that would keep a cannabis shop from opening up next to a school. And
Yeah.
keep it from exploding. It
Well, I mean, the
obviously that's a
state,
certain perspective, but
yeah,
but in a sense that's true. You're what I've been noticing over the past couple of weeks, and even more through this podcast we're doing, is you're pushing for regulation, you're pushing for control, you're pushing for appropriate expansion, when the expansion is going to come whether we like it or not. And
right.
that's a perspective that a lot of people don't see from you, which is actually one
Yeah,
reason why I wanted to have you on.
yeah. I mean, you, it's all relative to, the crowd I'm in front of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, um, to the anti-cannabis people, they probably think that, I have a side business in weed dealing, or something, that, or whatever they can justify as to why I'm so, for it. But, to the people in the industry, I have had times when they have, you know, uh, gotten into disagreements with me, and will ask me, like, whose side are you on? You're trying to slap on all these regulations and whatnot. How do you expect us to uh, operate and whatnot? And my response is that, but you will be able to operate. you know and that's going to be the compromise that they're going to have to make. This topic, I think, it triggers some people. Yes, some people will be misinformed, and they will continue to be misinformed, but it's incredibly important that people, the organizations, the groups that are in a position that uh, can inform people, can spread information, um, do it with the right information, objectively, so that the people who you can genuinely convince to change their opposition on it, that you actually have a fair shot at getting them to change their minds. um, and I not too optimistic, as to the the item that's going to come before us. Um, I'd like to be, but I don't think that the amount of activism that can that you can generate within, I don't know, what, a few weeks since
Mm-hmm.
this topic was re-brought up. I don't think that is enough time for for folks to move the needle on some of the folks on the council.
Yeah,
Um,
all it's doing is the people
it
who
took a whole
already
year
have.
for me.
Yeah, all it's doing is the people who already have their opinion, it's making them louder. That's all it's doing. You're not convincing anyone of anything different. And that's one of the issues with, this being such a hot topic is, whenever it kind of springs up, it's pretty quick. Especially this time around when it just kind of, popped out of nowhere. It's you're not allowing people to kind of decide for themselves. You're just making the people who already have opinions speak them louder. And great, if you have an opinion, speak up. That's great. You're entitled to your opinion, and it's great to be involved and be active. But one point you brought up earlier, I want to highlight. before we go and wrap it up, is you said for the activists who are trying to push their narrative, and to that extent, even the opposers who want to push their narrative, you're not getting anywhere by just saying your narrative very loudly. What you need to do is you need to take the time and educate people on why you feel the way that you feel. And then from then on, then you can start to move the needle, because you're going to get the people who are like me, who are right in the middle, who don't have an opinion. You're going to change their mind and you're going to give them an opinion. And you're not doing anything by just screaming your points. What you need to do is you need to convince the people who don't have an opinion. And I don't have an opinion on cannabis, but I have an opinion on this ballot, on this agenda item, because at the end of the day, I think we should vote on it. The people should vote on it, because that's how you're going to get the actual, what Milpitas thinks. That's how you're going to really see what Milpitas thinks, is you vote on it. We had a special election for the school board, and there's tons of divide over what candidate should have been appointed, and we put it to a vote. Whether you agree with the special election or not, I personally think it was a big waste of money, but whatever, that's my opinion. But we put it to a vote, and Milpitas decided. And that is democracy, and I think that we should do the same thing here. It's such a hot topic issue. Let's put it to the people. Let's let them decide. And even if it's for something as trivial and small as just, are we gonna make tax money from it? If it's gonna be this much of a hot topic issue, let's just put it to a vote for the people of Milpitas. But anyways, just to kind of recap what we talked about. So it was placed on the agenda, and it was pulled from the agenda because you didn't think that it would get the conversation that it deserved, and it would be flooded with outside narratives and feelings that wouldn't really do it justice. And on top of that, you had far more important time-sensitive items that were on the agenda that needed to be taken care of.
And I couldn't account to four.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, there's
Yeah.
the basic, why waste, time in a meeting that you could be, using to help pull Milpitas out of this crisis, on why waste time on something that won't even go anywhere. And, some people are going to probably think like, oh, he's playing politics. He couldn't get his votes, so we just pulled his item. It's good time management. It's good for the city. You knew that you would spend hours debating it, and you wouldn't get anywhere. And you didn't want to waste that time. You wanted to deal with the things that were important and happening right now during this crisis. And personally, hats off to you. I respect that. Some people are probably going to play the narrative like you're playing politics or whatever. But, as someone who understands the public process, I commend you for that. You knew that it would be hours wasted getting nowhere, and you wanted to, put the real issues up front that were time sensitive. So I commend you for that, by the way. And, a lot of the supporters are kind of going at it from the wrong direction. I think they should
They're
push.
going after me.
Well, the supporters, the
who's pushing for
supporters
it?
of, yeah. Well, so, I think we should be trying to convince the council that, this is bigger than 5 people. This whole topic, not whether we should tax it. Like that's so small in comparison to the whole topic. But anyways, this is bigger than 5 people, and it should go to the people. We vote in the United States on big topics, and the more voting, the better. I mean, with California, every time there's a major tax change or major anything change, we vote on it. And
Yep.
Why in Milpitas should we be denied our right to decide something that's of this caliber? Why are and that's my personal opinion, but the people who oppose and want you guys to deny this almost feels like they want to deprive you of your right to vote. And I know that's extreme. I know
No,
that,
it's
that's an extreme perspective, but that's what they're doing. They're saying we don't think you should let us vote on this. And there's two options. Either they're scared that a lot more people support cannabis and Milpitas than they think they do, and they want to keep a tight lid on this, or they just don't want the people to have a say in city politics. And
yeah.
both of those things are concerning.
I'll have to quote South Park. I'm sorry, I thought this was America.
It's a perfect quote for right now. It's
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah, this is America where we vote on stuff, and it's just there's a certain advocacy group that I just feel like is trying to and these people don't like me at all, which is quite funny to me because every time they make a big deal over something I say, all it does is show more people my point. So keep gunning at me, keep doing it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, with how much traction this topic has gotten, I feel like the responsible thing to do is just let people vote on it. And I'm not biased because I don't care, like, yes, our city needs tax revenue now more than ever. Honestly, 10 years down the line, we probably won't need tax revenue like we do right now. Milpitas is very financially responsible. And honestly, we'll probably be fine if we don't get it. Right now, it would sure help out a lot. But so I have no strong opinions one way or the other as cannabis as a whole. But I have very strong opinions that I think on big issues like this, that it's bigger than 5 people. And, I think that, the mayor who brought it up, and I don't think anyone on the council wants to deny the people's right to vote. I think there's been a lot of miscommunication and a lot of unnecessary drama and a lot of just other things that have come up that have kind of muddied the waters a little bit on this. I don't think anyone's who's sitting on the dais or on Zoom right now, but I don't think any elected official in Milpitas wants to deprive the Milpitas people of voting on something like this. I refuse to believe that anyone actually thinks that. But I just think that there was so much unnecessary things brought into the conversation, and a lot of miscommunication, a lot of confusion, and that kind of just set a different narrative on this. And you might have a different perspective on it, which is fine. I think we've covered
Well,
it.
I can only speak
But
for myself,
yeah,
but
yeah. But
yeah,
as someone who I know the public process and all this stuff really well, as you know, and even I got a bit confused from everything that was going on, and there are certain times where I'm just like, why is this being talked about right now? This has nothing to do with the
right.
item that was being brought forward. There's a lot of time where it's just like, wait, just wait, what's going on? Why are we on this right now? Public comment, I don't think was withheld because you all read the public comments and they were
Yeah.
posted publicly on the city website. And so that was an issue. I just think there was a lot of miscommunication, a lot of confusion, and a lot of unnecessary stuff brought into a conversation that should have been very point and shoot. It's should we let Milpitas residents vote on this or not? And when you strip away all of the emotions, all the extra stuff, all the opinions, and you just get down to the root question of what Mayor Tran was trying to convey when he brought up the agenda item, it was, should we have Milpitas residents vote on having a cannabis tax in Milpitas or not? And when you really break it down, it's really that simple. And that's why it kind of and that's why I asked you to be on, is because it blows my mind how much this is blown up when really the question is very simple. We're not talking about zoning right now. We're not talking about opening shops up in Milpitas right now. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the tax. And not only that, we're talking about should Milpitas residents be able to vote on it or not. And yeah, and that's why it just kind of blew me away. What are your closing thoughts on this?
Um, I thought this was America. um,
That's you could stop right there, and that says it.
yeah, you know, well, thank first of all, thanks for having me on again,
Of course,
and
anytime.
to really illustrate my train of thought and show my side of the issue. Um, this item's been honestly has had a huge emotional toll on me over the past few years, but more recently in the past few weeks. Um, it's difficult, when you're trying to help, you know, achieve a goal, and the people who uh, are supportive of that um, are against you because they think you're doing otherwise. And it's more difficult when you're already up against a bunch of opposition, and then the people who are supposed to be, who you're rooting for, are throwing you under the bus and calling you, all sorts of things. And, I for the most part, I try not to, let it get to me, and because yeah, I know that, it's not everybody, but um, I appreciate being able to, go share my perspective on this, and hopefully they can understand that I wasn't a bad guy here. Without going into too much as to what I do or don't support. Um, what I will end is with this: I support America, and I think we all do right now. But on a serious note, and you know, there's going to be times when there's going to be contentious issues. That's a given. But at the end of the day, we got to remember that we are a community, and we fall as a community, but hopefully we rise together as one as well. So
That couldn't have said it better myself. All right, thank you very much, Anthony, for being on. Hope to have you back again soon.
thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.